would like to thank the audience for attending and the organizers for giving me this opportunity to discuss such a timely theme. So my presentation is about the role of African literature in achieving sustainable development goals, a case study of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, half of Yellowstone. Introduction. Literature should not be studied only as a reservoir of beautiful words and symbols. Literature should be regarded as an inquiry into the way a language is used to express reality other than that expressed by conventional means. The idea that literature is a means to express reality is undoubtedly contentious. Literature is, after all, a product of writers' imagination. However, listening to the words of some African writers, like Adichie, speaking about the connection between literature, speaking about the connection between literature and reality and truth offers much insight into the way how literature can express reality. On his novel, Things Fall Apart, Adichie said, "I knew that I wanted the story to be true, the way fiction can be true." The connection to reality is crucial because, to borrow the words of George Joseph, African writers, rather than write and sing for beauty in itself, use beauty to help communicate important truths and information to society. Indeed, an object is considered beautiful because of the truths it reveals and the communities it helps to build. Well, to build the community, the African writer adopts the role of a teacher and an educator who raises social consciousness around different problems endured by Africans. As a result, we can call the African novel a committed African novel. So the critic employed the word committed literature to refer to the writings that draw the reader's attention to many issues such as injustice, exploitation, poverty, gender inequality. The African writer who assumes the role of a teacher and educator is committed writer in the way he is committing his work to important causes like ideological, political, or social. Because when governments fail to grant their citizens peace and prosperity, the claims of the African writers become, as Frantz Fanon said, not a luxury, but a necessity. Because the claims of the African writer are necessary. Here we can say that the African novel and African literature in general is transformed into a tool to further the reader's understanding of the world and to help develop them into more critical, conscious, global citizens. It's because the African novel has enormous potential for social change that I consider it as a vehicle to implement sustainable development goals for Africa's progress and happiness. Many African writers construct a fictive reality to change their social reality. Doubtless, the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is one of these writers who, through their writing, shed light on many problems that their post-colonial society is facing, to foster a desire in the readers to devise solutions. Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun can be considered as a voice of social change. So the first thing is literature to promote peace. The novel Half of a Yellow Sun opens before the Nigerian Civil War, shortly after the independence of Nigeria from Britain. The first pages picture the celebration of Nigerians who dream of a better future. Nigerians, like the character of Odinibo in the novel, began to view Nigeria through different lenses, a nation that's devoid of any colonial trace. Here is a quote. Odenebo is a senior lecturer at the University of Nsukka, Southeast Nigeria, debunks and refuses the idea that Nigeria was not ready for an indigenous university. He raised his voice in response. He argued about Nsukka being free of colonial influence. Odenebo thinks that independence would guarantee prosperity and unity. However, this dream of unity is shattered when the first flame of the civil war is ignited. Well, throughout the text, Adichie shows that ethnic conflict has caused a rift between Nigerians, divides them into us versus them. General Madu, another character in the novel, remarks, the problem was the ethnic balance policy. It was polarizing the army, that they should stop promoting Northerners who were not qualified. This polarization has torn the country apart. From 1967 to 1970, Nigerians have witnessed the most horrifying conflict. As a committed writer who commits her work to the cause of peace in Africa, Adichie educates her readers about or on the cause and the outcome of this ethnic conflict. Throughout the novel, Adichie demonstrates that these ethnic conflicts are a mere colonial legacy. Here is a quote. It has been caused simply by the informal divide and rude policies of the British colonial exercise. These policies manipulated the differences between the tribes and ensured that unity should not exist, thereby making the easy governance of such a large country practicable. No place in the world has suffered severely from ethnic conflict as Africa. Millions of Africans are displaced because of these ethnic conflicts. Hundreds of thousands are starving, awakening the readers to the fact that this ethnic conflict is a mere some neo-colonial interest that will help Adichie reader to see beyond their ethnic differences. It nurtures their empathy, tolerance, and intensifies their solidarity in the face of one enemy. This reality is powerfully articulated in the novel through the voice of a character, Miss Adichie, who said, "Of course, we are all alike. We all have white oppression in common." So after peace, now we move to the second goal, which is hunger, literature to end hunger. The Nigerian Civil War, or what is called the Biafran War, is a war of hunger. Starvation, quote, starvation was a Nigerian weapon of war. The blockade is the Nigerian government tactic to force Biafra to surrender, a tactic, unfortunately, that incited starvation. So here is a quote from the novel. He remembered how the child's belly had lately started to look as if he had swallowed a fat bulb, how his hair had fallen out in tufts, how his skin had lightened from the color of mahogany to a sickly yellow. The other children had teased him often once, who wanted to ask them to stop so he could explain what kwashiorkor was. So this description is a description of a disease. It is a kwashiorkor, and kwashiorkor is a severe protein malnutrition that plagues Nigeria during the Civil War. The painful images of Nigerian children dying from hunger accentuate the cruelty of war and the inhumanity of a human, because starvation is not just caused by the Civil War, it is also caused by corruption. In Africa, hunger is closely linked to corruption, which has become, to borrow the words of the Ghanaian writer Arma, has become a national game played by all. No one can deny that the image of a starving child is a touching image. The use of this image can definitely sensitize Africans and readers to the dangers of ethnic hatred, corruption, and also awaken the world to the reality that hunger still exists in Africa. The third goal that the novel is discussing is education. In Half of the Yellow Sun, education is portrayed as an essential element to awareness and the betterment of one's life. Born and raised in a small village, Ugu, a character in the novel, finds humble employment as a servant in Odinibu's house. Odinibu, however, decides that Ugu should receive education to enhance his life and the future of Africa. There is a quote, "Education is a priority. How can we resist exploitation if we don't have the tools to understand exploitation?" The transformation of Ugu from an illiterate child to a writer who is writing his own book speaks volume about the potential of education. The importance of education transcends economic growth. It enables Africans to write their own version of the history, to write back, to claim a voice, to reclaim history, and to push against classifications, falsifications, and lies. Through education, according to Adichie, through the voice of one of her characters, Africans can differentiate between two answers. The quote, "There are two answers to the things they will teach you about our land, the real answer and the answer you give in school to pass. You must read books and learn both answers. I will give you books, excellent books." In addition to the cause of peace, hunger, and education, we can add to the list other goals in the novel, which Adichie committed her novel to, as racism, gender, corruption, cultural identity. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I had to limit myself only to these three causes. Now we move to an approach of how to teach this novel to ensure the awareness and the engagement of our students. I regularly teach Half of the Yellow Sun to our third-year students in the course of Anglophone African literature. These students benefit from a lecture course of African literature which introduces students to the history and the development of African literature, major movements affecting this development. The course also traces the development of three genres like fiction, poetry, and drama. The TD session, practice session, is an opportunity to explore these three genres by focusing on the aesthetic as well as aesthetic characteristics of the work and thematic concerns of the literary works, which range from works from old generation of African writers to the younger generation, like our writer Chimamanda Adichie. To ensure students' engagement and awareness, I employ specific strategies. The first strategy is the use of literary theory. Third-year students are expected to study the African literature in the first semester and literary theory in the second. I would have preferred to teach literary theory in the first. Why? Because I believe that this would have endowed students with the necessary tools to understand and interpret literature critically. Since this is not the case, to help students think more deeply and insightfully about the literature they read, I resolved to back up my courses with concepts and ideas related to different literary theories. By the time, I resolved to back up my courses with different concepts, I said, related to different theories like post-colonialism, feminism, cultural studies. By the time students reach Half of the Yellow Sun, which is the third case study after Adichie, Things Fall Apart, and Googie, Grain of Wheat, students are equipped with the skills to assess and understand the text from different perspectives. This knowledge is manifested in the way these students use these concepts in their discussion of literary works. The second strategy is PowerPoint presentation, or PowerPoint. African literature can be taught by reading literary works, but there is a great difference when technology is used in addition to these works. In teaching African literature, I learned that it's impossible to detach text from context. To explain to students the political, the socio-historical context, I use PowerPoint presentation or PowerPoint to provide students with maps like the Nigerian map before and after the secession of 1967. I also use it for displaying important quotes to enact close reading of the text. The third strategy is YouTube. The use of videos of scholars and critics who comment on important historical events can illuminate the students' understanding of the novel's context. Interviews of literary critics and the writers of these case studies can be very beneficial for students as they can learn about the uniqueness of African literature and its place in the world. I also think that enabling students to watch the writers discussing important issues like videos and talks of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie on YouTube, discussing different topics like feminism, colonialism, cultural identity, can strengthen the bond between the student and the text that he is or she is reading. The students become part of the novel subject, which we consider that when we consider that Adichie is discussing the problems that not just Nigerian society is enduring, but many post-colonial societies are enduring, students feel that it is the world that she is representing and discussing. The last strategy is class discussion. Class discussion is an effective strategy to establish a student's interaction with the reading materials. In a TD session, the class discussion comes in the form of questions, answers, and comments after the individual or group presentations of students. These discussions promote deep learning, interest, and engagement. The discussion is based on the themes selected by students. I do not impose too much on the novel, not to over-determine it. I give much space to the interpretation of students, which often take us to different paths. In the discussion, students relate to their own lives and experiences. They keep inventing contents to match the framework of the novel. I believe that debates on political, social, cultural dimension of the literary text will transform students into good citizens because they take this understanding into their lives, begin to question many of their ideas and experiences. Conclusion. Literature plays a crucial role in language teaching. In addition to its capacity of improving language proficiency, it is also a tool that mirrors life. If we take it seriously, the themes that inform the novel can become our tool to generate students' empathy, tolerance, and awareness of global problems. Thank you for your attention.